Now that we've talked a little bit about some of the differences between speaking and writing, I want to take a look at how that often manifests in actual speeches. So I have some students here from my lecture here at the University of Washington. So my class just ended about 30 minutes ago, and they were quite kind to volunteer their time, come in. Today, by the way, is a Friday afternoon, so it's doubly impressive that they've come in to do this. But I've asked them to come in, and some of them are going to read a manuscript that I wrote about choosing the University of Washington, just so I can have some type of copy. They're going to read this thing that I wrote about choosing the University of Washington, and then others are going to talk about why they chose the University of Washington. So as you watch these, I want you to look for and listen for what the differences are between these performances. One is somebody reading a manuscript, one is somebody just explaining their story. So let's go ahead and take a listen to those now.
Hi, I'm Nirali. When looking into colleges, I, like most students, was concerned with picking the college that was good fit for me as a student and a college that would allow me to learn the most for a post-college career. I applied to a number of different colleges using the same basic criteria: affordability, academic reputation, and the location of the country. I ended up choosing the University of Washington because of its solid academic reputation, which was recently reflected in a number of national surveys. The fact that it was in Seattle didn't hurt. I'm happy with my choice. I look forward to a challenging and rewarding period as a full-time student and a scholar.
Hi, my name's Connor. When looking into colleges, I, like most students, was concerned with picking the college that was a good fit for me as a student and a college that would allow me to learn the most for a post-college career. I applied to a number of different colleges using the same basic criteria: affordability, academic reputation, and location of the country. I ended up choosing the University of Washington because of its solid academic reputation, which has recently reflected in a number of national surveys. The fact that it was in Seattle didn't hurt. I am happy with my choice. I look forward to a challenging and rewarding period as a full-time student and scholar.
Hi, my name is John, and the reason why I chose the University of Washington is because when I moved up here from California, my dad had the dream of one day seeing me as a UW Husky. So throughout my middle school career and my high school career, my main goal was to get accepted to the University of Washington. And the day I got accepted to the university was an achievement that I will never forget.
Hi, I'm Connor. I chose the University of Washington because of a couple of reasons. My family has a deep and abiding connection to the university. My parents met here and ended up getting married because of that. My family lives in the area, and this is my state. I grew up in Seattle. I want to stay here. And the University of Washington offers not only a stellar academic reputation, but the opportunity for me to meet other people who are going to be in the same area and really grow as an individual in this community. I'm really excited to be here, and I can't wait to continue doing that.
So again, I want to thank them for doing that. It's important to be able to run that type of experiment. And what I hope you're seeing there is a difference between writing performed orally and naturally occurring speech. And if we go back and listen to those, we can hear differences in vocabulary and clause construction and vocal variety. So in terms of vocabulary, a lot of the studies indicate that when we speak sort of naturally occurring colloquial conversational speech, we're using a different stock of words, right? In literary writing, I can have a much bigger vocabulary because I'm being very deliberate about my word choice. If I'm standing up and speaking, I'm operating with more of a colloquial vocabulary, sort of my working vocabulary. Odds are we're going to hear more hedging devices and more intensifiers in naturally occurring conversational speech. Hedging devices, sort of, kind of. More intensifiers, very, really, so on and so forth. In terms of clause construction, the text is usually bound, so that manuscript is bound by some formal grammatical rules that reduce it into these things that we call sentences. And when we speak, we might not actually speak in sentences. We might speak in fragments or in intonation units. Pause length plays such an important role in speech, but writing only has 3 ways of capturing this very dynamic process: the comma, the semicolon, and the period. So those are the ways in which we do pausing in writing. But in speech, we can have big pauses or short pauses. But the writing and speaking don't really, get on the same page there. Pun, horrible pun intended. So what else do we see in terms of vocal variety and pausing? Well, odds are, and we'll talk about this in the next lecture, if you're reading a manuscript, it's probably going to be more monotone, or at the very least, the vocal variety is not going to be your naturally occurring vocal variety. And we can see this. If you look at the text, here, you can see that there's so many visual signifiers that help the reader gauge visually the writer's intent. But when we speak, all those features are gone, right? So you look on here, I've got paragraph breaks, we've got italics and boldface and commas and semicolons and all this sort of stuff. Okay, all those visual elements are gone when I stand up to speak, right? I can't speak in an italic. I can stand sideways, but no one would really get what I was doing, and that wouldn't work at all, and it'd be weird. So all those are gone, but in speech, we have an army of phonetic cues that operate in sound to help the listener get our meaning. And that doesn't even get into all the visual markers that we have through gesture and movement and facial features and all that sort of stuff. So why go into all of this? Well, as speakers, we want to work in the realm of spoken language. And when you think about these two things, writing and speaking are very different. I want to take a lot from writing. I think writing can be very useful in the preparation of speeches. But at some level, the written document is different from the spoken performance. You know, you think in terms of how the audience interacts with the very act of communication. So if I've got a reader interacting with a text and they get confused or they get bored or they lose their place, they control that communique. They can move forward in the book, backward in the book, highlight, write on their own. They control it. They don't have that control when they're listening to a speaker. The speaker has to make decisions because so much is being dictated by the speaker's choices. So I want to take a lot from writing, but I want to recognize the differences. So in the next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we can translate this understanding between the differences between literacy and orality into better, and by the way, into less stressful speaking for you.